No one has asked me to investigate.
But the president
Liz.
has
We're
called,
also
the
worried
president,
about Liz Cheney,
the
Senator.
president has
You know
called
what we
for
should
this.
be worried about?
Ms. Bondi,
The
please
crime rate
answer
in
my
California
questions.
right now
You
is
are
through
aware,
the roof.
Ms. Bondi.
Oh, hold on. You asked me a question and I get to answer it. What you asked me, alleged conduct that's part of a pending whistleblower lawsuit.
Your robberies
Ms.
are
Bondi,
87% higher than the national average.
My question is this.
That's what I
My
want to
question
be
is
focused
this.
on, Senator.
Do you have the
if
power
I'm
to say
confirmed as
no to the
Attorney
president?
General.
In a shocking display of political loyalty over truth, a fierce confrontation unfolded between Adam Schiff and Pam Bondi. With the fate of American democracy hanging in the balance, Schiff boldly challenged Bondi to confront uncomfortable truths. The kind of truths that could dismantle the foundation of a presidency built on falsehoods.
I'm asking you, sitting here today, whether you are aware of a factual predicate to investigate Liz Cheney.
Mr.
Don't
Chairman,
talk to me. Don't insult me publicly.
This is so discourteous. This is so outside the committee's guidelines.
Senator, no one
Based
has
on what
asked
you
me
know.
to investigate Liz Cheney. That is a hypothetical.
The president has called for it publicly. You are aware of that, aren't you?
As tensions soared, Bondi dodged crucial questions, revealing a disturbing pattern of evasion and political allegiance. What followed was not just a debate, it was a wake-up call for every American who believes that justice must always come before political loyalty. At the heart of the matter is the question of whether political leaders, particularly those in positions of power within the Justice Department, can maintain their independence. Schiff pressed Bondi with an essential query. Do you have the independence to say no to the president when it matters most? The question was not just hypothetical, it was rooted in a real concern about whether the Attorney General would be able to stand firm against potential political influence. This issue became even more pressing when it was linked to the controversy surrounding the 2020 presidential election. Bondi's responses revealed much about the current state of politics in the United States, where political allegiances sometimes blur the lines between truth and loyalty. Schiff's inquiry about the 2020 election result, specifically asking whether Bondi could admit that Donald Trump lost, struck at the core of political rhetoric that has been increasingly prevalent in certain circles. The notion that the election was stolen was one that many of Trump's supporters clung to, despite a lack of credible evidence. Schiff's question challenged the very foundation of that narrative, asking whether individuals like Bondi, who had defended Trump, could step back and acknowledge the truth. The reluctance to say that Trump lost the election was, in Schiff's view, a clear indication of how entrenched political loyalty could override factual reality. Bondi, for her part, avoided directly addressing the question. She could not bring herself to confirm that the election had been fair, nor could she admit that Trump had lost. This moment served as a stark reminder of how difficult it can be for political figures to break away from the narratives they've supported, even when faced with clear facts. Schiff's argument was clear. When the highest levels of government are unable or unwilling to acknowledge the truth, the very foundations of democratic accountability are undermined. For Schiff, the role of the Attorney General was not just to enforce the law, but to protect the integrity of the system from political manipulation. He was quick to highlight the danger posed by a lack of independence within the Justice Department, especially when the president or any political figure could potentially use it for personal gain. Without independence, the risk of the Justice Department being used as a tool for political retribution becomes all too real. This is where the concept of checks and balances within the government plays a critical role. The Justice Department must remain neutral, free from political interference, to ensure that it can uphold the law fairly and impartially. The moment that neutrality is compromised, the public's trust in the system erodes. For Schiff, this was not merely a theoretical concern, it was a real threat to the integrity of American democracy. The stakes of the conversation were made even clearer when Schiff warned of the potential consequences if the Justice Department were to fall under the influence of political forces. He pointed to the Supreme Court's decision in the case of Trump v. the United States, which had granted the president significant immunity in certain areas, particularly in relation to the Justice Department. Schiff argued that this decision had effectively given the president a get-out-of-jail-free card, allowing him to manipulate the department for personal and political interests. If left unchecked, this could create a dangerous precedent where the president, or any future leader, could use the Justice Department to escape accountability for their actions. Schiff's response to Bondi's evasions was pointed and firm. He was not simply asking rhetorical questions, he was making a plea for accountability. The question about the 2020 election was just the beginning. The real concern was whether those in power had the fortitude to stand up for what was right, even when it meant going against their political allies. Schiff's argument underscored the importance of an independent attorney general, someone who could act without fear or favor regardless of political pressure. This question of independence extended beyond the immediate concerns of the election. It touched on the broader issue of how political figures in power interact with the law. If the Justice Department were to lose its independence, it would no longer be a safeguard against potential abuses of power. It would instead become an instrument for political gain, a tool that could be wielded to protect the interests of the president or any other political figure. The tense exchange between Schiff and Bondi was not just about defending or attacking Trump, it was about the very nature of governance. At its core, the debate was about the importance of integrity within the political system. Could those in power be trusted to uphold the law when it was difficult or politically inconvenient? Or would they allow their personal loyalties to dictate their actions, potentially undermining the trust of the people they were sworn to serve? As the conversation continued, it became clear that this was not just a disagreement between two political figures. It was a larger, more fundamental question about the role of truth in American politics. Schiff's pursuit of accountability and Bondi's reluctance to address the uncomfortable truths about the 2020 election reflected the broader challenges facing the political system. In a time when misinformation and political loyalty often trump facts, the role of figures like the Attorney General has never been more critical. Schiff's message was clear: an independent Justice Department is essential for the preservation of democracy. The Attorney General must be someone who is willing to stand up to the president when necessary, even when it means confronting uncomfortable truths. Without that independence, the system becomes vulnerable to manipulation, and the public's faith in the justice system is severely damaged. The tension between these two political figures highlighted the ongoing struggle within American politics. A struggle between truth and loyalty, between accountability and political expediency. As Schiff continued to press Bondi, it became increasingly clear that the challenge was not just about answering questions, but about confronting the deeper issues that lay at the heart of the political system. The exchange may have been just one moment in a long-running saga, but it served as a powerful reminder of the importance of truth, accountability, and independence in the pursuit of justice. The confrontation between Adam Schiff and Pam Bondi escalated as the discussion moved beyond the topic of the 2020 election results and into the territory of presidential pardons. This shift in focus deepened the divide between the two and highlighted the serious challenges of upholding democratic principles in a politically charged environment. Schiff's pursuit of accountability clashed with Bondi's evasive tactics, and what followed revealed even more profound issues within the American political system. So Schiff, never one to back down when the integrity of the system was at stake, began to probe further. The topic of presidential pardons, particularly those related to the January 6th insurrection and the violence that ensued, was at the forefront of his mind. He asked Bondi whether she would advise the president not to pardon those involved in the violence against law enforcement officers. Bondi, in her typical fashion, sidestepped the question with a vague answer. She suggested that pardons would be issued on a case-by-case basis. But this response lacked the clarity and directness that was needed in such a critical moment. Schiff, however, was relentless. His concern was not just about the technicalities of the legal process, but about the broader implications of allowing a president to use the power of pardons for personal or political gain. The ability to issue pardons is one of the most powerful tools available to a sitting president. But it is not without limits. The use of this power to absolve individuals who have engaged in criminal acts, especially acts of violence, poses a direct threat to the integrity of the justice system and the rule of law. Schiff was not asking about the logistics of pardons. He was questioning whether Bondi, should she be appointed to a high position, would be willing to take a stand against the misuse of presidential power. As the exchange continued, it became increasingly evident that Bondi was unwilling to take a firm stance on the issue. Instead of condemning the actions of those who had stormed the Capitol on January 6th, or acknowledging the gravity of the situation, she focused on the idea of reviewing each case individually. While this may sound reasonable on the surface, Schiff saw it as a tactic to avoid addressing the larger problem at hand. In his view, the very idea of issuing pardons for individuals who had engaged in violent insurrection was a betrayal of the principles that underpin American democracy. Schiff's persistence was rooted in the larger question of how far political loyalty could stretch before it compromised the rule of law. By avoiding a direct response to the question about pardons, Bondi was, in effect, endorsing the idea that political considerations could outweigh the need for justice and accountability. Schiff's approach was clear. The role of an attorney general, or any other high-ranking official, was not to protect the president or his allies, but to ensure that the law was applied fairly and consistently, regardless of political connections. The conversation took another turn as Schiff moved to the topic of the preservation of evidence related to the January 6 investigation. He asked Bondi whether she would commit to ensuring that the evidence from the investigation would be protected and not destroyed. The question was simple. Would she, as an official in the Justice Department, ensure that the crucial records of the January 6 investigation remained intact? Bondi's response was less than reassuring. She insisted that she would follow the law and consult with ethical officials in the department, but her answer lacked the decisive assurance that the public was hoping for. For Schiff, the issue was not just about legal procedures. It was about the public's trust in the government. The destruction or manipulation of evidence could not be allowed under any circumstances. If the investigation into the January 6th attack was allowed to be tampered with or buried, it would send a dangerous message about the integrity of the entire system. Schiff's probing was a reminder that transparency and accountability must always come before political considerations. The question of evidence preservation was not a technical matter. It was a question of whether the truth would be allowed to emerge or whether it would be obscured by political interference. Bondi's reluctance to provide a firm answer about protecting the evidence raised further concerns about her commitment to upholding the law. By failing to directly address the question and provide a clear commitment to preserving the records, she seemed to suggest that, under her watch, political considerations could take precedence over the principles of justice and transparency. Schiff's questioning was not an attack on her personally. It was a reflection of his concern about the broader implications of allowing political loyalty to cloud the pursuit of truth. What emerged from this tense exchange was a broader commentary on the state of American politics. The conversation was no longer just about legal technicalities or political tactics. It was about the survival of democratic principles in an era of deep political division. Schiff's persistent questioning highlighted the critical need for officials in positions of power to prioritize the rule of law over political alliances. Bondi's evasive answers, on the other hand, underscored the dangers of allowing political loyalty to influence decisions that should be based on justice and the public interest. As the conversation unfolded, it became clear that the stakes were much higher than a simple disagreement between two political figures. The issue at hand was about the very nature of accountability and the role that those in power play in upholding the integrity of the justice system. The power of the presidency, particularly when it comes to pardons, and the manipulation of legal processes is immense. It is therefore critical that those in positions of authority be able to act independently, without fear of political repercussions, to protect the rule of law. The tense exchange between Schiff and Bondi also highlighted the growing mistrust between political factions in the United States. As Schiff pressed Bondi on issues of accountability, she repeatedly deflected, suggesting that she was more concerned with protecting Trump and his political interests than with ensuring justice. This raised a troubling question. How far would political figures go to defend the actions of a president, even when faced with clear evidence of wrongdoing? Schiff's questions, however, were not just aimed at Bondi. they were a broader indictment of the state of American politics. The issue was not just about one person's refusal to acknowledge the truth. It was about the larger systemic problems that allowed such evasions to take place. The question of whether the Justice Department could remain independent from political pressure was one that had far-reaching implications for the future of American democracy. If political loyalty continued to overshadow the pursuit of justice, the very foundations of the democratic system could be at risk. As the exchange came to a close, Schiff's final remarks were a call to action. He emphasized that the truth must always come before political loyalty. Without truth, there could be no justice. Without justice, there could be no trust in the system. The conversation between Schiff and Bondi served as a powerful reminder of the importance of holding those in power accountable, regardless of their political affiliations. In the end, it was not about one individual's actions, it was about the survival of the principles that define the American system of government. The confrontation between Adam Schiff and Pam Bondi was more than just a political debate. It was a battle for the soul of American democracy. It was a reminder that the pursuit of truth, justice, and accountability must always come before political expediency. As the political landscape continues to evolve, it is crucial that those in positions of power remember the importance of upholding these fundamental values, even in the face of immense pressure and partisanship.